Good afternoon, everyone. If you could just take your seats. Thank you very much for joining us here. To those of you here in our offices in Brussels, a big welcome. And not forgetting all those journalists who are joining us online as we're live streaming from Brussels. So we have journalists joining us from right across Europe. So welcome to everyone. The last time we gathered so many of you together was back at the start of the year in January, when Luca de Meo kicked off his term as ASEA president. And he's back here with us today to take stock, but more importantly, to look forward to 2024 and beyond. But before he does that, I'm going to hand the floor to our Director General, Sigrid de Vries.
Thank you, and also from my side, a very warm welcome. It's always a pleasure to welcome you in our house here, especially with such a brisk and wintry weather outside. I'd like to really stress that this press conference marks a significant turn in the road for ACEA. Today we unveil our manifesto. You find it also on your chairs, and it will be also online. For the EU's next 5-year mandate. It's called a competitive European auto industry driving the mobility revolution. And the launch comes at a timely moment, not only for our industry, but also for Europe. As you know, we said it before, our industry is in the midst of a most significant transformation. And ACEA is also changing, as some of you may remember from our last press conference in March. ACEA committed to a new approach. Well, today's manifesto is an embodiment of this new approach and our commitment to managing the significant transformation ahead. And it's actually signed by all of the ACEA member CEOs. So that really shows the commitment of our members and the personal commitment and engagement also of our CEOs. And the manifesto itself is also not the usual one. It's unique. It's more than just a wish list or a set of policy recommendations. It sets out concrete actions in 3 areas: demand, supply, and production, seeking to deliver a future-proof European mobility ecosystem. So they're not just simply aspirations, but also jointly with our partners, we're out to deliver an actionable roadmap going forward. And before I hand over to Luca de Meo, I'm also making one other important announcement. I'm really glad to announce that he will be the ACEA president for another year. So he's been elected president this morning by our board. And we're really confident that under Luca's steady stewardship in 2024, which is going to be a crucial year with the European Parliament elections and a new European Commission coming, we will bring this manifesto roadmap to life. So I will now leave it to Luca, to him to speak more about what is at stake and what needs to be done together with all our stakeholders. Please.
So thank you, Sigrid. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I think that Europe, as Sigrid said, and its automotive industry are now at the turning point and the next Parliament and Commission are going to play, I think, a pivotal role in the process. A tsunami of regulation challenge is arriving in the next few years. A lot of EU commitments have a deadline in or before 2030. So you have the Net Zero Industrial Act, the Critical Material Act, the PFAS regulation in development, the CO2 standards for light vehicles. And we'll also have the large battery regulation and the general safety regulation coming into force. And these are only few examples. It means that the Parliament and the Commission in place from 2024 to 2029 will be in charge of the final run to achieve all these targets. It is therefore crucial that we all take time now to look at these commitments, I would say, very, very carefully. We must look at whether they are achievable or not, and at which cost, of course. And we must move on quickly implementing, I would say, as Sigrid said, very concrete actions. For that, we also need a strong conversation. I repeat that, I said it like a few months ago. We need a very, very fluid and strong conversation, and also based on facts. And with everyone around the table, including those who have the direct knowledge, those who ultimately put the money on the table to invest, like we're doing, and those who have to implement the regulation at the end of the day, and that's us. Those also represent the industry that we think is the most committed to decarbonization. When you take into account that we are investing no less than 250 billion euro in the transition. Over the recent period, ACEA has been reshaping its positioning to achieve that, because we think the automotive industry is part of the solution. So I repeat that we think that the automotive industry is part of the solution. We have been striving to put facts and seriousness into the thing, making ACEA more connected to the whole mobility ecosystem, more assertive, talking to the public opinion, not only to the regulator and the policymakers. So with the perspective of the new Parliament and Commission, we felt it was also necessary to accelerate and take a step further. And the news of today is that we are publishing, as Sigrid anticipated, the result of a work that we've done collectively with all the members of the ASEA. And the idea was to set out a very, very clear and comprehensive way, let's say, our vision proposal, as well as a roadmap under the form of the manifesto. So I'm not going to go over all our recommendations and roadmap in detail one by one, as you can find them on the document itself, but I'll just make a few comments on our philosophy. First, we think that Europe urgently needs to adopt a holistic approach when it comes to taking the automotive industry challenges. Too often, Europe has been piling up regulations that are sometimes conflicting one with each other. For example, phasing out ICE on one side and then pushing a new regulation on ICE with the Euro 7 combustion regulation. When we have 8 new regulation events coming each year until 2030, on average, it should actually ring a bell, telling us that there's a bug somewhere in the system. And actually, it's the whole software that we have to change. I think it's getting clear every day that we need a truly cohesive industrial policy. If you look at our global competitors, you see that they are very good at doing that. So we propose to look at the things from a 360 degrees perspective, encompassing the entire value chain from the upstream to the downstream. In other words, beyond traditional industry boundaries, with a comprehensive view over the real issues, because the real issues now cut across the classic sectors, so automotive to mining, energy, infrastructure industry, just to mention a few examples. Another key idea that we want to push is that Europe must not only ensure that we are as well equipped as the others are. It must also ensure that we are competitive on a global level playing field. Competition is, we think, a very healthy thing. We think, and true competition also means fairness and reciprocity. And finally, let me restate that tech neutrality should be a guiding principle when it comes to framing the mobility of the future. The enemy are CO2, pollution, noise, particulate, congestion, etc. Not one single technology or another, or one technology against the other one. In fact, for example, making zero-emission vehicles, including small EVs, in Europe is a challenge that we should all unite, take to align the planets, because product like this can create jobs in Europe if we all manage to do the things correctly. Will have an impact on air pollution, of course, urban congestion, strategic autonomy, and resources protection. This is a team sport because you also need public working on supply chain securitization, setting the conditions for automotive circularity, pushing research on recycling technology, for example, ensuring competitiveness, especially through affordable and green energy supply. Ensuring satisfactory charging infrastructure, we often talk about that, deployment, and working also on the demand side through adequate, fit-for-purpose incentive schemes. And this is true at all policy level, from the EU down to the urban authorities, who have a key role to promote a smart solution locally. So just take as what the Japanese have done with the K car. This is the perfect example of the kind of things we should be able to do also in Europe. Financial support, of course, with the car acquisition rate lowered by 1/3 compared with the regular personal cars, with highway tolls lowered by 20%, keeping city center accessible to periphery dwellers, etc. So this is, I think, a good benchmark of what we could do, but also support through smart policy design when they decide that all vehicles would be, let's say, submitted to proof of parking spot requirement except the K car. This is what happens in Japan since, I would say, probably 2 to 3 decades. I see no reason why the Europeans should be doomed to be bad at playing this kind of collective, smart and winning game. So this is the kind of very, very concrete proposal that you might find in the manifesto, on which we want to work with the idea of ensuring at the same time global competitive jobs in Europe, green transition and freedom of mobility for all European citizens. This manifesto is, I think, a call to all public stakeholders, political candidates, EU, but also national and local authorities. We call them to engage with us in a very, very constructive dialogue, to come up with answer up to what you citizens are entitled, I think, and we think to expect. And now I'm finished, so it was a short introduction, and we are more than open to all your questions.
Thank you, Luca. And as some of you asked before, I open up the floor also for our forecast for 2024 on sales and registrations. I give you these numbers up front. So we currently forecast a 12% growth in car registrations, so passenger car registrations in the EU for this year, 2023. And I think it's important to note that despite this growth number, registrations are expected to remain relatively low at over 10.4 million units, and that's nearly 20% less than the volumes recorded in 2019, so pre-pandemic. We're still not back where we were. And anticipating renewed growth in new EU car registrations in 2024, albeit at a slower pace, we project an approximate 2.5 increase in 2024, with sales volumes expected to reach nearly 10.7 million cars next year. EV market shares this year is going to land at around 14.5%, and that will probably go up next year to around 20%. So a very dry complement to, I think, the way more exciting messages Luca de Meo just passed about the clear aspiration, ambition of the auto industry to do well in Europe, to have a thriving industry here, a thriving EV manufacturing industry as well, including for small EVs. And I think that's a real clear and positive proposition that we also make to legislators and stakeholders, and where we look forward to establishing that in the years to come. Do you want to lead the questions, Cara? Yeah, thanks.
So just before we open the floor for your questions, a few practicalities. Mr. De Meo is wearing his hat of ASEA president today, so we'll be dealing with industry-wide questions rather than company-specific ones. For those of you in the room, you need to take a mic to ask your question. My colleagues will pass them around. If you could just say your name and media outlet, so everyone knows who you are. And for those online, we'll also be taking your questions. You can just type them into the comments, but please also write your name and media outlet so we can see that. So I see a hand raised here.
Yes, so this is Timas from the French press agency. So about the next Twingo. No, I'm kidding. You talked about the competitors that have some advantages. We're looking, of course, at the US, at China. What do you see in their plans for the automotive industry, for EVs that we could copy in Europe?
Look, I think that's a very interesting question, because we actually are facing two different worlds. You know, a world where in the US where the IRA is basically some form of protectionism for the cars that are produced on the territory. And on the other side, you see China, which is a system that is supporting since more than a decade, probably 15 years, the development of the EV industry, you know, across the borders and, you know, and at all levels of the thing. I believe that, you know, let's say our position is that we actually need competition, we need a free market. So we're not necessarily fond of long-term closing European market because, you know, long-term this will create, as we know, you know, inefficiency and inflation, and will not enable us to really face competition, right? Short-term maybe, you know, it could be helpful, but in the long-term that's not the right solution. On the other hand, what happened in China is something that be a source of inspiration because it was, let's say, big work done, you know, public-private. As I said, they were able to secure the upstream part of the EV value chain from mining to refining. It's a very fundamental reindustrialization work that needs to come to Europe, you know, and it will not take 6 months. So it's going to be something that will take years. You have a very strong, I would say, development of the charging infrastructure. You have also definition of standards that are actually very much discussed with all the, you know, industry players all the time, that are adapting all the time, that are trying to push competition so that, you know, the ecosystem itself gets better and better every, you know, on every generation. And it actually worked because when you see, you know, the product that coming from China, you know, the quality of the work that they do, I think we can look at, you know, a lot of things that were done. And so, but even there was a teamwork. It was a teamwork between public and private. It was a teamwork across industry. And it was actually some form also of co-petition between, you know, the actors there, the smaller, the bigger, the traditional OEMs that transform themselves. So I think could be a good showcase for us. But your question is very valid, but might require a very, very long explanation. But I think in general, what I can see from China is that the very holistic approach on the problem and the recognition that this is not, these transitions cannot be on the shoulder only on the industry, but you need to go through, you know, you need to climb all the value chains, right, downstream and upstream to, you know, to create a real value.
What's the short-term closing of the market?
Sorry?
What's the short-term closing of the market for you? How long does it take?
I don't know, because that's it's not up to me to say, but I think that we probably, until we are all accelerating. I mean, just to make it clear to everybody, because you know, there is that kind of a prejudgment that the automotive industry is actually resisting in that transformation. It's not true, and the proof is that we are putting 250 billion euro into the thing in Europe. Okay, so tell me one industry that is putting so much money to, you know, to provoke the transformation. So we are complete. I live it every day. I mean, I know that I'm here like with the hat of president of ACEA, but I live it every day. All the money, all the efforts that we're putting every day to make sure that we can, you know, create cars that are zero emission, EV cars, hydrogen, etc. So big part of my development budget right now goes into this kind of thing, right? So it will take time. I think that we all have to work, and maybe by end of this decade we'll be, you know, matching the competitiveness of some of the best players in the world. In some cases already the case, but as a system we are not where we should be in Europe. And that's you should think about the charging infrastructure. We calculated that we have to multiply by 7 to 10 the speed of installation of the charging infrastructure in Europe just to follow the demand that will enable us to hit the emission target. That's just an example. This is not the case everywhere. Of course, you have countries where it works very well. You know, your country, you know, Netherlands is good, but if you go to my country, it's not working, right? So Europe, it's a concept, with a lot of countries. We have to have an homogeneous thing, also because the people move around Europe. Thanks God.
Okay, thank you. I think we had one question here, and then we take another one from the floor here, and then we'll go to some questions online.
Thanks. It's Lisa O'Carroll from The Guardian. I'm particularly interested in the tariffs that are coming in January on exports to the UK.
Yeah.
Can you give us an update on who you have recently met in France, because France are the holdout country, and what you hope, not what you hope, because we know you're looking for a 3-year suspension, but I suppose what will happen if you don't get that, if you only get 1 year? And then the second part of my question is, you talked about competition and that you're not in favour of long-term subsidies or state support, yet the French think that your request for a suspension of the tariff equals protectionism, that China has this long head start on you, and that your real fear is about the Chinese dumping electric cars in the EU. So my question is...
You who? You, me as a head of Renault, you as me as an ACEA, what do you referring to?
Both would be interesting, head of Renault and head of
But look, I think I'm here to talk about the ACEA position. It is clear that we support the idea that that kind of deadline would be pushed back 3 years. We have been working, of course, to try to somehow explain to the authorities, to the deciders, what would be the implication for both sides of the channel, and then are good if the thing, because in fact that's exactly what I was referring to. There was an assumption at the beginning that the system would be upstream prepared to to produce European localized whatever materials, CAM, pre-CAM, and this is not the case right now, right? So we need time, and it shows already that the system is under stress, or the concept is under stress. So that's a simple, very pragmatic thing. If that doesn't happen, I think all OEMs, whether it's European OEMs or OEMs that are operating and producing in UK, will have a substantial damage of billions of euro. Okay, so if it's only for 1 year, right, that damage will be one third of the big damage that this thing will create from a business point of view. It is as simple as that. Talking about who I've talked to, I mean, I allow me to keep the thing for myself, but we went very, very high into the hierarchy, because we think that's a very important topic for the sector, and we feel like there is no need to actually penalize ourselves with this thing, and we rather it doesn't mean that we don't want to work to find the conditions so that this treaty would be let's say respected, but if you do it now, there will be an impact on the business. I don't know if
it's in the crucial scaling up phase of the electric vehicle industry. So and the investments have been pledged. They just need to come online. So anything we do now with an exemption will not change anything in terms of which investments have been done or the build-up of the value chain. So it's really having to pay tariffs without much use, as industry sees it. And this is indeed because they were very ambitious targets from the outset. And things have gone differently because of the pandemic, because of inflation, because of other reasons. So, we're not where we thought we would be. And then it's also a responsibility of policymakers to say, okay, maybe we need to adapt exactly in the interest of securing that very important ecosystem, the whole value chain here, because OEMs are a crucial part of the ecosystem and the value chain. So that's in a way also why what we're asking, and also why we ask for the 3 years, because in the first year compliance I think would only be 10%. It goes up, but also at the end of 2026 we will not be at a 100% compliance, but at least there is a bit more time. So damage will be. We did a study, maybe you've seen it. 4.3 billion euros are at stake.
The question is about, who have you spoken to in France? Does Macron agree with you? Have you had access to Macron or his team?
What a question. You can't ask me, with who I spoke about that. I mean, I don't understand. Because we have we have our network to try to explain to the people. It's not a personal thing. I mean, don't reduce it to a personal thing. This is a thing that has to do with the treaty between countries, etc. There are people are in favor. There's been debate, and we activated our levers to explain, because one thing is important. We're not doing politics here. We're talking about business. The only thing we're commenting on the fact is that if this thing comes on 1st of January, will have a X impact on our business. And we, of course, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, we don't want to see our business shrinking because of that. That's the only thing I can tell you.
Okay, thank you. I have a few more hands raised. I'm going to go here first. We have time. Don't panic.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yep. Thank you, Javier Albizu for the Spanish news agency EFE. I heard your commitment or your challenges, but not many commitments. You were also asking about making affordable the production of electrical vehicles in Europe. So I'd like to ask you in terms of pricing, because the prices of cars have been raising quite a lot in Europe over inflation the last 3 years. So do you predict that's going to continue or not, and why? Thank you.
Well, look. The thing is, there I have to put my Renault hat into the thing. I think the best proof that we are serious about it is that, last week we presented a car that, of course, we're going to make for 2026, in which we think we can deliver to European customer, new generation small electric car for urban usage, electric, of course, below 20,000 euro. Okay. And if we announce that, it means that we know how to do it, and we have made our math. And of course, we will never do a project like this, if this thing would not be profitable for us. And the whole aim of the thing is to make a product in Europe, source in Europe, and the opportunity that we see, and it goes in the direction of the industry proposing solutions rather than defending positions. Is the fact that when you enable with maybe even with the support of regulation, or when you are addressing certain specific needs like urban mobility, then you have a technical setup that allows you to have, for example, a much smaller battery. You don't want to put like a 50, 60 kilowatt battery into the thing, because that brings the cost of an electric car. So when you look at usage of those products, we think we can propose something that address exactly the user of the thing, but without the cost of a car that is supposed to do everything. I mean, give you an example. We sell the cheapest EV car in Europe. This is Dacia Spring, which comes from China, by the way. And you look at how many kilometers in average people do every day. It's 30 kilometers. And what is the average speed of that car? 26 kilometers. So you don't need a 100 kilowatt battery, which, by the way, is normally a kind of ecological disaster, right? So we find a way to come up with a solution. And if we found that solution, I'm sure that other OEMs will be interested in looking at that, because there is a demand, right? Now, you look in countries like Japan, 40% of the market is K cars, right? It's not that Japan is a poor market, etc. It's because they recognize that in cities you better, drive small cars, because they occupy much less space, so they can be cheaper, because if you only use it, you don't do 130 kilometers an hour on the highway. You don't need big batteries, and that's I think a very good example on how we can bring solution and how we can be part of the solution. So far, the regulation in Europe in the last 20 years, they have only pushed the weight and the dimension of the cars up. Okay, and when you push weight and dimension, of course, also the price goes up. And most of the OEMs are in trouble. I can talk to you about that by direct experience. When they have to produce A segment and B segment cars, they are not profitable anymore, because you have to put, you have to transform those kind of cars in Christmas trees, and they don't make a difference if it's a Clio or it's a big, big premium limousine. You have to, as an entry ticket, you have to get into this thing. But it's very penalizing for the car that people can afford. This is the reality of the thing. This is the reality, and by doing that, because also of the change of technology, I think we can find a solution. That's what we can do.
Sorry. I'm just going to take one question from our journalists following us online. We have one from Mr. Ekel Dorna from Bloomberg, who asks, if the regulatory environment stays the same, what will happen to the European auto industry? So if it stays as it is today.
As it is today, you mean as it is today with that kind of florilege of regulation come everything, or if it stays like today that there's no regulation anymore?
I understand he means if the situation stays as it is, so with the level of regulation that we have currently in Europe.
I mean, I think that there is a notion of let's say a notion of how many, but also it's all regulation are not necessarily a bad thing if you know, if they're done right. So some of us for sure. You know, the whole idea of compacting, you know, creating packages of regulation that are much easier to, you know, to apprehend for us. I mean, I was saying something like in a previous meeting, I guess that probably 20-25% of my engineering capacity is just to respond to regulation. It's a lot, right? So there might be ways to, you know, kind of clean up the thing, package them in a way that is more simple for us. Normally what we also do is, you know, we look at the regulation like this, then you have limits from a certain date. We can also look at progression and some of the targets will help us also. And that's the theory of Oliver, which I think is right. And I think that what needs to be also, you know, change is the fact that we need to be able to build regulation together with the policymakers, because the issues are becoming so technical, okay, and so complex that a good dialogue to prepare the regulation would be very, very helpful, and not just getting the letter, you know, directly from the thing, because it creates sometimes a lot of. And so we are not looking for confrontational relations with the policymaker. On the contrary, what we're saying is we discover actually things. You know, on evolutionary technology, we discover opportunity every 6 months. Yeah, and you know, if the regulation comes the week before we have discovered, you know, a new thing that is possible, then you have a mismatching to the thing. This is the reality we're in. We're not anymore on mature technology that we know pretty well, with an incremental thing. Sometimes you have jumps into the technology, whether it's hardware or software. So for me, this is the thing, and the big worry we have is also that you know, that if regulation as it happens until now are pushing up the cost of the product, then of course the dimension of the European market will be you know, much smaller than in the past, and you have scenarios, you know, up to half of it by, you know, 10-15 years. So you know, I don't know if it's just like, you know, figures that are thrown into the thing, but we clearly see the pressure of people not being able anymore to buy new cars, right? You see that from the fact that the car park is getting older, right? Not younger. You see from the fact that you know, the used car market is growing, yeah, and this is in general not good, because if you keep a lot of old cars into the thing, for the impact, for safety, for etc., and for the industry itself, that's not good news. So we have to look at the things that they are. All the regulation, they've actually pushed the cost up. It didn't, you know, really have an impact on the overall, you know, CO2 or, you know, impact of in absolute terms. In 20 years, we reduce, let's say, emission of cars by 90%. 20 years. But when you look at the whole thing, it's actually going up, because older cars on the street, bigger cars are on the street. Yeah. So we have to ask ourselves the question: are we going in the right direction? And we actually challenge that, and you know, we think we have ideas. We can propose things like, for example, the Twingo, or other things, right? So we're working on.
And I think also following the Green Deal, that has given us now a lot of targets on paper. It's really time to implement.
Yeah.
And it's such a huge transformation that it's also very fair to ask for a certain prioritization. I mean, the auto industry is one of the most regulated sectors. So if you just look at the normal pace of revisions and some of the things that we know are in the pipeline in the next few years, we see an average of 8 or 9 regulations until 2030 coming up. So, I mean, and this will add a burden.
Every year.
Every year. Luca was talking about engineering capacity, but it's really about prioritization. We want to implement this, the Green Deal. There's a huge commitment. Investments have been made, and that should have priority, and the rest should be reviewed very thoroughly to do it in a smart way, a coherent way, consistent way. Individually, often it may make sense, some of these measures, but to get taken together, they simply add up.
Well, look, I think I want to make a point here because you actually suggested that, but I want to make clear to everybody that when I have conversation with my colleagues in the industry, nobody is in the industry is doubting that we have to go in the direction of zero emission cars, decarbonization, etc., etc. So don't take it like we're trying to take a defensive position, because also for us it's a possibility to reinvent our business, right? And we care about the well-being of the society and the compliance with the rules. And I think that we all see the Green Deal as a, let's say, huge opportunity for Europe to be the place in the world where climate tech business emerges, and technology and know-how, so that we can sell that kind of technology and experience to other regions of the world. So it's very clear that it's the big chance, is the core of the I would say economical industrial strategy of Europe, and we want to make sure that the automotive industry participates to the thing, right? It's and there is nobody that has a doubt in any of the conversation that we have. The question is, how we do it, at what speed is possible to do that, how we can adapt the strategy, in the time to to get there where we want to get all.
Thank you. Philip here has been waiting for a while. So.
Yeah, Philip Blenkinsop of Reuters here. I'd like to ask what you think the impact in Europe has been and will be from the US Inflation Reduction Act. We're almost kind of a year in. I mean, so far, EU exports of cars to the United States has not been so much affected, but maybe you have an overview of what's happened and what is expected to come.
Look, let's say I think that the market is pretty dynamic, and I would say, thanks God, the European. I mean, most of the European that actually operate in the US, they also produce there. Big part of their thing, and most of them are much more turned into ICE car so far. So there's not much electric vehicle. The IRA is very much favoring local production for EVs. Okay, this is what it is. So you probably don't see it. What the thing that, let's say, somehow as a phenomenon, as an effect, is more interesting is that, for example, when it's coming to make deals with battery producers to bring whatever gigafactory, for example, investment in Europe. There are not many around the world, right? You have basically the Korean, the Chinese. Maybe some Japanese. The temptation is for them is actually to prioritize US than Europe, because it's simply more easy, the whole thing, right? There are more advantages, quicker. The money is on the table, the rules are simple to understand. And so that's the challenge we have in the preparation of the thing. And as you don't have, 200 potential providers, then you always end up talking with the same 4 or 5, and if they have to, a penny to spend, they might, go there rather than here. That's what's happening.
Okay, I see lots of hands up, but I'm just going in the order. I saw there was one here. If you don't mind, Ben, the other side. We still have some time for questions, so.
Thank you so much. Alice Hancock, Financial Times. I wondered if you could just comment briefly on the impact or potential impact of CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, on steel and aluminium, etc., in the sector. Will it change supply chains? Is the sector concerned by it? Yeah, any reflections? Thank you.
Well, look, I'm not a super specialist of the thing. What I can tell you is that, of course, we have seen a raise of the price of steel that is probably represent 10%, 8 to 10% of the cost of a car in Europe. Also because of regulation and somehow, how do you call them, like quotas that were in place in Europe. And the reality is that we let's say, we actually pay steel in Europe at a much higher price than some of the competitors paying because also of the cost of energy, etc. This is the reality of the thing. The next challenge is when there is a regulation which is supposed to come on, on green steel, is this thing going to accelerate? So is that kind of gap opening? And how we organize ourselves, because potentially we need to, the energy industry to support, green steel production at a very competitive price. And then it goes back to the story of, the whole energy market, how much we are paying, let's say energy in Europe. I think I'm paying probably double the price of what a Chinese OEM is paying energy right now. Of course, miner is so far cleaner. In some of our operation in France, so we also use nuclear energy, so it's decarbonized. But that's a handicap, especially on some production process. A battery, for example, requires a lot of energy to be produced, so it could have a huge impact on the competitiveness of battery produced in Europe, right? So it's a very delicate thing. I don't feel like comfortable, giving a very, very precise answer, but we are a little bit like concerned, to lose competitiveness if we don't master the thing properly. Again, in a teamwork, right, between the auto industry or in general the manufacturing industry, the steel industry, and the energy industry.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to the journalists who are joining us online again. We have one or two questions relating to what Sigrid mentioned earlier on the outlook for the market. In terms of the battery electric vehicle share, what we see will be the main drivers for growth for that in 2024. And that's a question from Ms. Sifieri from Automotive News Europe. What would be the main drivers?
I think you have the better market perspective.
Yeah, so I think that there's, this in 2023 was the first year in history where there were more EV launched in the market than combustion engine cars. So there will be for sure, let's say, offer, product effect on that for sure, because we used to have 10 models, and probably we are now already beyond 50 or 60.
The offering is larger.
Yeah. So there is and I think what's happening is that we're trying to apply, EV powertrain on concepts that are more and more mainstream, and more in the core of the market. And what will happen next in the next couple of years is that we'll start to see small, for example, B segment car like a Polo or Clio coming, and totally electrified. We will in Renault launch the Renault 5, which is a very historical, iconic model reinvented in electric. So it'll be in the market mid of next year. And when you do that, of course, you have smaller batteries, but still maybe the car will be, more than 400 kilometer range, so completely usable. But the price will go down. So I think that EV technology enters in small car segment that represent maybe 40% of the European market, or 45%. In some countries, like my countries, the large majority are small cars, and then we will start to buy cars. This is the thing. And, we'll have up and downs into the thing, because, right, there is so much, let's say, sensibility about, the percentage, how this thing is growing, because everybody's looking at whether this thing will be a success or not. every month, you see comments in the press. Oh, it's going down 1 point. It's not working. For sure, we'll have up and downs. Sometimes, for example, when you have pricing of electricity that's going up because it's linked to the price of gas in some country, and consumers start to become a little bit more about that. But in the long term, there is no, let's say, there's no way back because it's written in the rule. Maybe we'll discuss if later we'll be able also to offer, I don't know, fuel cell cars that are competitive in terms of price, so it will not be only electric, or maybe there is debate on zero carbon, fuels, alternative fuel. But I think that EV will become a very dominant part of the European powertrain mix because it's in the rule, right? Because it's the law. And you know what? If you think about it, it's not so bad. So when, I often drive electric cars, they are very pleasant, right? You have issues of course, recharging. You have to be a little bit more worried than planning your trip, etc. But they're silent. They accelerate. They are very, let's say, from a consumer point of view, it's a good thing. Independently from the impact on the environment, electric technology is getting, let's say, very, very interesting.
Okay, coming back to the room, I know we had a question here for a while.
Yes, thank you. My name is Koen Verhelst. I work for MLEX. I have a question on the EV probe on the Commission side. There's been quite some internal, let's say, disagreements in the auto industry. There's anonymous comments, like some that agree with the probe, others that don't agree with the probe. How do you approach this from an ASEA perspective, and what's your expectation of the outcome on the Commission side? Thank you.
Well, look, I think we have nothing to comment. This is a process that is, the European community has a full right to do, and there are probably hundreds of them in the system every year. But of course, when it touches the automotive industry, it becomes a little bit more pop and visible, right? So they have all the right to do that, to assess, to estimate potentially some potential distortion of competition. So we don't comment on that, right? So what I can say is that let's say we'll have to wait for the conclusion of the thing and see what are the countermeasure in case they will find something. So and of course we are very open with the authorities because it's almost a legal process, right? So what do you want me to comment?
I can think of some things.
Okay, I think we also had some questions right down the back, right at the end there.
Hi, Stefan Grobe with Euronews. You singled out the European elections as one of the big events in 2024. I'm wondering what outcome of this election do you fear most? What would be the worst case scenario, following the elections for the car industry? Thank you.
I think fragmentation. So I think what we actually need is to have counterparts that are in continuity in a way that many people we have been establishing relationship, having long conversation, etc. So and we want to face a European community that is compact on one idea because it helps us, right? So this is because otherwise it's very very difficult for us to navigate. The thing, but I'm just one European citizen, and you have 389 million that will have to vote, and I only hope that we can get the European Community Authority to understand that Europe needs to go back to business and needs to develop an industrial strategy as much as. And we used to say that, almost as a joke that, U.S. stimulates, China directs, and Europe regulates. And, piling up regulation doesn't make a strategy. It helps, right, at the end of the day, but it doesn't make a strategy. We need a strategy because otherwise Europe will lose ground and competitiveness. We had, of course, conversation with some of the key guys here, and it was reassuring to hear that they are seeing the the economical dynamic in Europe compared to what is going on in Asia and in the US, and they are worried that Europe is losing ground in competitiveness. So people like us, we are there to make sure that Europe is one of the most competitive places in the world, with hard work every day, right? And productivity and innovation, et cetera, et cetera. So that was reassuring for me. So the topic of, competitiveness back into the center of the conversation, it's a good sign.
Okay, I'm going to take another question from our journalist joining us online. I have one from Antonio Salimbeni from Il Sole 24 Ore. He wants to know about how decisive public intervention will be in terms of tax relief for those who buy an electric car. So how important is tax relief for consumers for purchasing electric cars?
Right now, from what we see I'm not going to give you an opinion, I'm trying only give you some facts. Every time subsidies go out for purchasing a car, the market of electric car goes down pretty dramatically. Okay, so it's not yet a natural market. It requires support. And, that kind of stop and go is also very dangerous, right? So, it needs to be some kind of a continuous thing. And it needs to be modulated until the thing gets into a critical mass. So it will take years before that comes. Probably one generation of cars, maybe 2 generation or generation and a half until 2035. But if you want to, provoke that shift, that will be, I think, necessary for a number of years. Of course, we're not only counting on on subsidies to make sure that the product competitive, because if you only do that and then you keep your cars that are not lowering down their cost, et cetera, one day will be dead, right? So just personally, like a couple of weeks ago, we were presenting a new initiative of a company that is focusing only on EV in the Renault Group. We actually committed to 40% cost reduction one generation on another. So from now to 27 to 28, to reduce the cost of an electric car by 40%. It's massive, okay? But we are looking at solution to do that. So we will have to reduce price, so there will be less pressure from public authority to support us with subsidy in order to enable people to afford electric cars, which, by the way, is a problem that we see. A lot of people don't buy an electric car just because it's more expensive. That's what it is. Not to run, just to purchase. Not to run, because to run is maybe half the cost or 1/3 of the cost, depending on the country. But you take an average battery on an electric car. This thing is 5,000-6,000 euro only in the battery. Okay, it's 3 times the price of an electric engine embedded in the product, without counting the power electronics and the electric engine. So structurally, an electric car to purchase is more expensive, and that's a barrier, that's for sure. Our job is to get down in segments, so we get closer to the cars that the people normally buy. Because right now you have a lot of big cars, electric cars, so we have to go down, and then even on that car, on each one of those cars, to reduce the cost. And battery technology is not like doesn't obey to the Moore law of semiconductors, where you double productivity and performance of the thing every 18 months. It's more of a maybe if you're good, you get a better performance of 7-8% per year. So that means you double the capacity or you halve the cost of a battery in 10 years. We have had this experience with the Zoe. We were at Renault amongst the first one to enter the EV markets in 2011, 2012. So we have experience. So it takes a little bit of time, but I can guarantee you that we are, working very hard on that, because we need to ensure that one day, as soon as possible, there is price parity between ICE and EV, because at that moment, the price will not be an argument anymore. It will be only the technology.
Then I think indeed, you mentioned maturity. We're still in this transformation. We're at the beginning of it, not in a mature situation. That's why our manifesto also focuses on the manufacturing side, which is where industry can make the most of a commitment, also with the investment, doing their job, reducing costs, etc. But you need the supply chain to work, and you need the demand side to work, and there needs to be the enabling framework with charging infrastructure and also available green energy, affordable energy, etc. And that is the crucial thing here. Vehicles are very often not the bottleneck, also not for consumers to buy them. They need to charge them, they need to be able to use them. And that is what now we really need to get together in the next few years to make this transformation work. And with that, we then also can help ensure a thriving auto industry, which is a very important industry for Europe. In Europe.
You need to ensure clean energy.
Exactly.
Otherwise, there's no point in doing all of that. So.
Okay, well, I think that's a very good note to end on. I'm very sorry we couldn't take all of your questions, but thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Mr. de Meo and Sigrid, for
Thank you very much
interesting discussions.
for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.